I just completed a live Q&A webinar with Dr. Christine Bishara. She is a well-known gut expert in New York City and author of The Gut Revolution. We had such an enjoyable time taking the questions from people who wanted to know how to upgrade this brain and the gut brain. Can't wait to share this with you. I did acupuncture and nutritional medicine we got Maine. Yep, we got Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. For 23 years in Southern California, taught at UCLA, was in Beverly Hills, Belmont Shore, and Santa Monica. And I love what acupuncture does for people. It really is able to create some rapid change, reversing stroke sequela, getting people moving again after Bell's palsy, helping gals get pregnant that have been struggling, reducing stress. There's a whole thing called battlefield acupuncture and the military and the VA fell in love with it for stress and anxiety. And then before COVID, thank goodness, I discovered that by tapping into the subconscious mind, our conscious minds are processing about 30 bits of information per second. Our subconscious minds are processing 40 million bits of information per second. So it's kind of like a rider on an elephant. If the rider wants to go in one direction, but the elephant is insistent on going in another direction, the elephant's going to win that every time. And what was so amazing is when you learn how to speak the language of the elephant and get it to realize, oh, I don't want to go that way. I really want to go that way. Then when the rider and the elephant are in sync and going in the right direction, then people can experience the peace that they're looking for, the bliss, the joy, the happiness, the calm. There's just so many people out there that are struggling just to experience calm. Anyway, I've had military veterans who had 100 on their PTSD score, which is the highest. They went through the military stuff and still were struggling, still couldn't focus, still had panic attacks. And after 2 sessions, they were saying it can't be this easy. And yeah, it actually can be that easy. Sometimes it takes time, and I'm sure Christine feels the same way. Sometimes it's you find the magic bullet right away, and other times it takes going through layers and dissecting things. So I have found that by getting to the root of the problem in the subconscious mind, people are dramatically able to sleep better, sometimes sleep well for the first time in their lives. Sometimes they've been through sleep therapy. A lot of them have struggled for years, headaches, migraines, back pain. That's been a shocker. People that have come in needing to just get over the phobia of getting in an MRI because they needed it for their back pain. And after a few sessions, they don't need it. They don't need the MRI anymore because their back pain's not experiencing discomfort, which John Sarno, as Christine's probably aware of, documented very well that when you're in stress, you're going to have a lot of musculoskeletal issues. You're going to have inflammation. There's going to be a myriad of problems. And what's really cool about all this stuff is when you start taking, you know what, I'm going to show my little diagram here. This is from Donna Gates's book. You may have seen this before, Christine.
That one I haven't seen, but I do love John Sarno's book.
People say they want to get healthy and they ask you how to do it. Well, whatever is stressing the body out, whether it's pollutants, whether it's bad thoughts, self-deprecation, eating bad food, chemicals that you've been exposed to, mold, whatever the thing that's holding the weight on this camel's back is making it more stressful to live a happy and healthy life. So whatever we can do to pull those things off quickly and easily, then that camel, i.e. you and me, can get on to living the happy, healthy life that we want. So I'm going to just go ahead and turn it over.
Knows about Dr. Sarno's book because I think it's a really good read. He's an orthopedic surgeon who I think wrote the book in the 70s, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe earlier. It might have been the 60s.
Yeah. Orthopedic surgeon who saw a lot of back pain. And obviously he saw a lot of cases that had actual injuries to the back, but he said, no, it was my party. And the majority of cases that he saw of back pain were actually stress and psychologically induced. And it's a great book if anybody wants to read it. Basically talks about the power of the mind-body connection and how even you can have a car accident, for example, and think that you injured your back, but that back injury and the pain will just worsen right after the injury. And then you take an MRI and there's nothing wrong. So it's fascinating that you're talking about this. I think the brain is very powerful and brilliant, but I also think that a lot of times what it's doing is seeking safety. And that safety is to protect the brain, but it doesn't necessarily protect our body.
100%. And time after time after time, those programs that are running in the subconscious mind. In fact, literally, I just finished a session an hour ago with a very well-established doctor who is a giant in her own right. But like all of us, therapists need therapists, doctors need doctors, coaches need coaches. We all, especially if our childhood was traumatic, those imprints that are in there. And, she went back to ages 3, ages 4, and then back to age 3. And those imprints, you get a strong emotion and a powerful thought, and they wire together. Neurons that fire together wire together. That's Hebb's law from 1948. And they stay that way. The brain keeps defaulting to what's familiar because it's trying to protect you, even though it's doing it with really outdated information. I love to say people are like an iPhone 17 operating on iPhone 4 technology. But once that elephant sees, oh, that's hurting me, that's painful, that program isn't even, supposed to be operating in my life anymore, it'll make the changes. As long as you give it very clear instructions, and I give people a customized audio recording that they listen to each night to get them from their beginning spot to their ending spot, so that they can keep. It's like taking your brain to the gym. You just start building those neural pathways to what you do want rather than what you don't want.
Hey guys, studies are showing that 68% of people that watch podcasts regularly don't click the subscribe button. Do me a huge favor. If you like this content, click subscribe so other people know where to go for the cool stuff. Thank you.
So Christine, go ahead and give us a setup. Tell us what the latest and greatest is in gut health. What are people overcoming? What are the biggest obstacles that people are experiencing today? Is it antibiotics? Is it environmental pollutants? Is it poor food choices? What are the biggest mistakes that people are making? And how can we correct them?
Good questions, all of them. I should probably backtrack and tell everyone a little bit about me. So for me, my journey kind of with gut health and nutrition and just holistic healing is more of a personal journey that I went through, having lost a lot of weight as a teenager before I went to medical school, before I even knew all the pathways. And it just clicked for me. I not only lost the weight, I felt better physically, obviously, but mentally too. And so for me, that kind of, I guess, inspired me or interested me in learning more. And so when I went to medical school and started studying all these pathways, then it all kind of made sense. And so for me, I love anything nutrition related, even though my background is traditional medicine. I worked for many years as a primary care physician. And what I saw over and over in my patients was exactly what Dr. Tara said, is there's a lot where the gut and the brain connect. And we're now seeing that in many conditions. We're seeing that in even conditions like Alzheimer's, for example. So we know that Alzheimer's obviously is on the rise. And we know traditionally what happens is these amyloid plaques are depositing in the brain, right? We didn't know why. Why were these amyloid plaques depositing in the brain and then blocking these neuronal signals from reaching one another? And now we're starting to see those amyloid plaques might actually be a secondary effect. They're not the primary effect of Alzheimer's, which is what we initially thought. They're actually the secondary, almost like a protective effect, right? Not necessarily protective because they're harming us. But what happens is the inflammation actually starts in our gut. And that inflammation in the gut starts to spread systemically, and it starts to go to the brain through the pathways from the gut to the brain. The vagus nerve is a big one. And then that inflammation travels to the brain and deposits there. And in the brain, that inflammation translates into amyloid plaques. And then these plaques are blocking signals, and this is what's happening. And then we're seeing it again in Parkinson's disease, where if you look at somebody with Parkinson's and you find that their gut microbiome is very different from someone without Parkinson's. We're seeing that in multiple sclerosis. We're seeing that in so many autoimmune diseases. So for example, there have been some studies on multiple sclerosis where they took two identical twins, one with multiple sclerosis and one without. And these twins grew up basically in the same environment, same parents, same everything. And then they looked at the twin who developed multiple sclerosis, and they started looking at their microbiome, and they found that over and over, these twins that developed multiple sclerosis had bad bacteria that were in their gut that the twins that didn't have multiple sclerosis did. So we're definitely seeing a huge link between the gut and every single system in the body. And so this is really where I love to educate about how the gut really plays a huge role in our overall health, especially our mental health. So, yeah, my goal.
I love that you shared that, and I also the crossover between that and the plaques in the arterial walls, as we know from Stephen Sinatra's book. They now know that. Well, they've known it quite a long time, but they covered it up because they wanted to be selling certain drugs more than others. But they now know that the arterial plaque walls, it's like the firemen showing up. You don't blame the plaque; it's the secondary effect. The primary effect is the inflammation and the need for that plaque to stick to the arterial wall like a Band-Aid.
Exactly. It's almost like I said, I don't want to say protective because obviously it's harmful, but it's this way of kind of protecting the person. And believe it or not, they're now seeing that the arterial plaque, a lot of it's coming from, especially in the heart, is coming from the mouth. So the oral microbiome, we're seeing if the oral microbiome has an imbalance where there's a lot of harmful bacteria, plaque in the mouth. So that plaque travels and deposits in the heart arteries. So again, we really have to pay attention. And this is something that I even ignored for many years. I probably hadn't seen a dentist in 3 months. And then I went and had my teeth cleaned. And I'm so glad I did because that's a huge step in kind of rebuilding and getting rid of that inflammation, because the inflammation literally starts in the mouth and is throughout the GI tract.
Interesting. I'd love for you also to share with the people on the call quickly, because you said you lost a lot of weight. That was quite an amazing story. You were quite overweight, and it was a school counselor who told you you never lose the weight. And because you're the kind of person that's like, oh yeah, watch me.
It's actually my pediatrician. And it was the summer of my sophomore year in high school. I was 15. And I weighed 213 pounds at the time. And I didn't think I was overweight, but I went to the visit and she put me on the scale and she said, "You're 70 pounds overweight and you're never going to lose the weight." And I was so upset with her for telling me that. But I guess in hindsight, maybe she was smart in telling me, because that summer I kind of like set out to prove her wrong. So yeah, I lost the weight. This was in the 80s and we didn't really know a lot. We were just kind of counting calories. So I was doing that. I was counting calories, but I knew that we had to eat healthy. So I was eating a lot of vegetables, and I noticed that I was not as hungry. But more interestingly is I started kind of experimenting with intermittent fasting at the time. And I started restricting, eating a little bit more, eating a little bit more, and then just restricting my eating hours to 14 or 16 hours of fasting and then eating in a 6 to 8 hour window. And then I started noticing that I was losing even more weight. And at the time, I kind of didn't put 2 and 2 together until, again, when I went to medical school and we started studying all these pathways in biochemistry. And then it totally makes sense because your body kicks into these secondary modes of basically fueling our cells, right? So we fuel our cells either through external methods like glucose from food, or we have internal backup mechanisms from our liver. For example, our liver stores a lot of stored glucose in this form called glycogen. And that glycogen storage starts to burn once we haven't eaten in a certain time period, usually 8 to 10 hours. And then our body fuels our cells that way. And then it starts to fuel from fat. So this is where you start to see the weight loss. So this is how I lost that weight. And again, this is stuff that doesn't cost any money. It's all just simple things, simple tweaks in our body, because I really do believe that our body is the best doctor. It just doesn't teach us, right? So we have to learn about it and then kind of teach ourselves. But those are just little things that I learned along the way. And now I really want to share them with everyone, because I think we've become a society of quick fixes. And I think quick fixes obviously are fine, but in the end, you really don't train your body how to properly fuel itself. So the quick fixes turn into, well, we all know how that ends. So, yeah.
Nicely said. Before we open it up to questions, I'd love to get a quick synopsis of how our gut health affects our mood.
Okay, great question. So, all right. So we have these nutrients that are in food, right? So some of the nutrients, a lot of them are called amino acids. Think back to chemistry and studying in high school. And remember those amino acids, they were the building blocks, right? Of products, proteins in our body. And so a lot of these amino acids our body can make, but a lot our body cannot make. So I'll give you a few examples. So we all know the neurotransmitter serotonin. So serotonin obviously helps with mood. It helps with sleep as well. But serotonin needs a precursor amino acid called tryptophan. And tryptophan is one of those amino acids where our body can actually not make it. So we have to obtain tryptophan from food. So if we're not eating enough foods with the nutrient tryptophan that's going to help us make more serotonin, we're just not going to make enough. And a lot of people don't realize that, right? So then we end up taking medications which help to keep our serotonin in our body around longer. It doesn't help our body make more serotonin. It just helps to keep the serotonin around a little bit longer without it being broken down as fast. And if that's what you need, that's what you need. But I think simultaneously, you can also encourage your body to make more, right? Because that's going to affect your mood. So we need to eat more tryptophan-rich foods. So I outline this in my book, but I also outline it in my website. I have a free starter guide on my website. But foods like, for example, walnuts are very rich in tryptophan. Or like foods like soybeans, edamame are really rich in tryptophan. A lot of protein-rich foods, animal-based foods like eggs and turkey. We all know turkey, right? And wild fish. Those are all very tryptophan rich. Bananas are very tryptophan rich. So if we're making an active effort to eat more tryptophan rich foods, we're going to find that our body is able to make a little bit more serotonin. So that's just one. But they're basically precursors for a lot of these neurotransmitters that we make, like dopamine. Again, precursors in foods. So I list these all on my website, but I also list them in my book because I believe that food really does affect your mood, and we're not taught that enough.
Love all the stuff you're talking about. I recently interviewed Hyla Cass. I'm guessing you're familiar with Dr. Hyla Cass. She's an orthomolecular psychiatrist. She was at the forefront. She when doctors were just routinely handing out prescriptions, she'd be like figuring out, well, what foods, what amino acids do you need? Because if you don't have those building blocks, it's pretty hard for your body to create what it needs in order to get the proper balance of the serotonin and the dopamine and the other neurotransmitters that we need to have a balanced life. So, Christine, would you give out your website and of course your book, the Gut Revolution, is available wherever you buy books.
From Within Medical is the website.
And then, what is the resource that you offer on there?
If you go on my website and you click Starter Guide, there's a list of the 50 best foods. There's a list of the healthy oils, the healthy sweeteners. And what else is on there? There's a lot of good resources, but I also post a lot of really good information on my Instagram, which is Dr. Christine B. It's spelled Dr. Doctor. I post a lot of really good microbiome information as well.
And just by removing the seed oils and the artificial sweeteners, I mean, some people just have miraculous turnarounds just from that. And I'm guessing that eliminating gluten, because gluten is not what it was 50 years ago, especially in this country.
Yeah. So the thing with gluten for me is, yes, it's interesting because we've had gluten for years, right? And we've never had any issues with it, but it's really the way that it's processed now. And I would say if you tolerate gluten and you tolerate breads, great. But if not, and you're noticing that you have more bloating, then definitely go on a gluten-free diet. But maybe put in like sourdough bread, which is a little bit healthier, right?
I'm a huge sourdough junkie.
Yeah. But also, we really just need to eat more plants. I just posted something about fiber today, like plant-based fibers, because everyone's focusing. I don't know if everyone's noticed this, but we're all focusing on protein now. I don't know if it's a marketing tactic where everyone is saying you need to get 100 grams of protein and you need to do this and the protein this and the protein shakes. And yes, protein is important, but nobody's talking about the fiber. And the fiber is really what feeds these beneficial bacteria that we have. And if you don't feed them, they die off. And then this is where you get that imbalance in the gut. So it's really important to feed the bacteria what they like to eat, because when they're full, I always say when they're full, they make you full. So they like a variety of plants. They like fiber. They like different fiber. So different bacteria that are beneficial like different types of food. So one might like mangoes, one might like asparagus, one might like artichokes. So my suggestion is 30 different types of plant-based fibers a week, just a variety, right? Diversity. We want diversity in the world. We want diversity in our gut, because those different types of fibers really help to support the bacteria in our gut, which are doing really amazing things for us.
I love that. So great. So, yeah, I'd love to open it up to questions. Again, this intimate setting is so great. So if you have a question for me or for Christine, by the way, Michelle just downloaded your book from Audible.
I appreciate that. I hope you like it. If you like it, please post a review. The review helps others kind of see the algorithm.
Absolutely. So you can either raise your hand or type it in the chat box, whatever is convenient.
And there's no such thing as a dumb question, because honestly, I've had doctors who really know nothing about the gut. The gut is one of those, I guess, realms of science where we really don't know a lot about. So there's no such thing as a dumb question. Just whatever you have about the gut or the brain, or, you know, the link between the two, feel free to ask.
Don't be shy. The only dumb question is when you don't ask.
And then you say, oh man, why didn't I ask that? Oh, actually, so Anne, how do you know about acetylcholine? Because that's actually one of the neurotransmitters I talk about in my book. So here's a cool thing too, is so there's a psychiatrist named Dr. Eric Braverman. Have you heard of him?
I actually haven't.
No. So he kind of came up with this neurotransmitter personalities. So he talks about this. He talks about, like, some people are serotonin personalities, or some people are acetylcholine personalities, and some people are GABA, for example. And so based on what your body's making a little bit more of, it kind of dictates your personality. So I'll give you an example. So since Anna's asking about acetylcholine, so acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter that basically helps to control the speed of how fast neuronal connections and communication is happening in the brain. So people who make more acetylcholine, they're kind of faster thinkers. They're like more like quick and like quick on their feet. And so for them, they make a little bit more acetylcholine than maybe another neurotransmitter. And so the interesting thing about the acetylcholine molecule is the choline part of the molecule is it's like a fatty membrane. And so you need to eat a little bit more fat in order to make acetylcholine. So foods that are obviously rich in healthy fats is what you want. You don't want the fried chicken. Although, interestingly enough, your body, when, for example, you're deficient in acetylcholine, your body will actually crave the fried chicken, or it'll crave the fried foods, because that's a quick fix for your body. And your body's just like, I just need to replenish quickly. I don't understand this whole healthy fats versus not. So I'm just going to crave anything that's going to help me make more acetylcholine. Whereas if you're understanding it, then you can actually prevent that by eating healthier fats like avocados or wild salmon, for example. These are good fats that have the choline molecule, and then that helps you make more acetylcholine. So a lot of times in my practice, I'll see patients, they tell me that they have brain fog, or there's something a little off. They're just not as fast, or they're feeling sluggish. And then we'll check, and sometimes we'll find a low acetylcholine. And then I recommend foods that kind of help enrich that, and then they feel better. So, and, you know, oddly enough, some people make more. Like I, for example, am an acetylcholine dominant person. So I make more acetylcholine, for example, than my husband, who is more calm and relaxed and doesn't have to be quick and, you know, a little bit impatient like I am. So it really kind of depends on your personality too. But I think there's so much that we're now learning about our bodies and our neurotransmitters that we really kind of now can nourish ourselves based and more uniquely, right? So,
and eggs are a pretty awesome source of choline, aren't they?
They really are. Yeah, eggs. I would say, like, eggs, if you're going to pick 3 foods to eat a week, I would say eggs, walnuts, and avocados. They're so nutrient rich, and they have so many really good different nutrients and fiber.
And wouldn't we say there's a big difference between the egg that, I mean, I got 3 chickens in the backyard that chickens were wandering around on the grass, living like a chicken should, versus the one that was stuffing in a box, shot full of all kinds of things. You know, if you saw the way animals were raised in factory farming, you wouldn't want anything to do with them. And they're higher in omega-6s and lower in omega-3s anytime the interventions are such that they're stressed out all the time. All that stress is getting into your body too, all that adrenaline. Tell us about the difference between a healthy egg and maybe not so healthy an egg. And also, you mentioned soybeans being a great form of tryptophan. How important is it that they're like non-GMO?
Yeah. So where you get your source does matter, but I also feel like we don't all live on a farm, right? We don't all have access to chickens in our yard, for example. And so we really have to just kind of improvise as best as we can. So I would say if you're going to get the grass-fed organic eggs, they might cost a little bit more, but you're going to see the difference even in just the richness of the color of the yolk. So you're going to see like a deep orange, right? Versus like a lighter yellow. And that's showing all the really important nutrients are in there, right? That's like a deep, rich color. So it does make a difference. But if you don't want to spend the money on that, just eat a regular egg. But obviously if you can afford the little bit more expensive, it's better for you. It's very important to eat the organic edamame, a good source. For sure. Edamame is another one that also has really good fats, also really good in plant estrogens. So for example, women who are postmenopausal, they find that if they eat a lot of tryptophan, their symptoms start to improve, like if they're having hot flashes and things like that. So estrogen is important, and the way that your body makes estrogen is also important. There's different pathways of estrogen production, and there's bad pathways and good pathways. So that's really important too.
So I think we can both take a stab at the next one, and I would tie the next one and the next one. So Michelle asked about cortisol.
So
Cortisol's
about cortisol.
Cortisol is obviously related to stress. I have found that, again, finding out there's no substitute for eating right. There's no substitute for exercising. There's no substitute for shutting things off and getting a good night's sleep. But I have found over and over and over again, people who have done everything and they've just got this. In fact, again, just this afternoon, I was working with somebody who just had that background anxiety. She is a health expert. She's covered all the bases with regards to that. But there was just crap from her childhood that was still firing and wiring in the background, subconsciously getting triggered by all kinds of things that were irrelevant to her life today. And once the subconscious mind can see, I'm not the iPhone, I'm not the iPhone 4, I'm the iPhone 17, and it gets the upgrade, then that cortisol level naturally dials back. So over and over again, I hear people saying, in fact, sometimes it's in the first session. They've experienced more peace than they experience in their entire lifetime. And then by just walking through the process, I do 3 sessions over 90 days because I want to make sure somebody firmly gets from where they are to where they want to go. It is neural conditioning. It's kind of like taking your brain to the gym. So by listening to the customized audio recording each night as you drift off to sleep, you're going to be building the neural pathways to that more relaxed state that is truly who you authentically are today. And then I'm going to turn it over to Christine because I know there's a huge diet component to this too. And I always tell people, look, if your blood sugar is going up and down, there's not a significant way you're going to have a pathway to feeling calm. And then there's the fatty acids and the neurotransmitters, which Christine will tell you all about.
I agree. I think also it's important that you mentioned this too, is the brain kind of listening to those audio things, right, at night before you sleep. Well, we know the brain loves repetition. So if you give it repetition of bad thoughts or negative thoughts, it's going to focus on those. But if you repeat the healthier thought process, right, especially before you sleep, it will condition the brain to really default towards the relaxation. I did want to add about the cortisol. So basically, cortisol is one of those things, again, where our body produces to protect us. Not knowing, right? So it's a survival substance that our body releases. So for example, back in the day before we had grocery stores and and shopping so easily, right? We actually had to hunt for our food. We had to find our food, and it wasn't always easy. And so our body, if we were stressed, for example, and not able to find food or not sleeping enough, or just there was just scarcity, our body released cortisol because it was stressed about surviving. And so that cortisol helped us by uh, increasing fat storage and not allowing us to burn fat as easily because our body's thinking, well, I don't know when the next meal is, right? So let me kind of conserve. And so this is where the cortisol really kicks in. But unfortunately, now that we have access to all these things and don't need that, cortisol kicks in for other reasons. It kicks in for stress. Again, body just wants survival. So if it senses that you're stressed or it senses that you haven't slept, it thinks that it needs to protect itself because it doesn't know, are you just somebody who doesn't have access to food right now? And I need to worry about this. So let me conserve and again, mobilize all these inflammatory pathways that are going to help me, because a lot of people don't realize is inflammation short-term is actually beneficial. It kind of helps all our cells to get revved up, our white blood cells, which help to fight infection. So this is what our body's thinking. It's thinking, oh, well, I'm just going to start this pathway of short-term inflammation to kind of rev things up and make sure everything's protected. But the persistent elevation of cortisol is what we've seen is actually harmful. So the cortisol spikes where we have a little bit of stress in the morning and then the rest of the day is calm. And then the next day, a little bit stress here and there is actually not what's harmful. It's the persistent elevated levels of stress, which cause persistent cortisol to be high. It's never going down. And that's really where you have that chronic inflammation. And the chronic inflammation is what's really harmful to our body.
And there's a landmark book on that I'm sure Christine is well aware of, The Stress of Life by Hans Selye. He was a Canadian physician back in the day who noted that it's the chronic stress that ends up degrading our tissues in our body and causes us the problems. It's not the momentary running from the saber-toothed tiger, getting out of the way of the taxi cab that almost hit us. That's not a problem. It's the chronic, debilitating. And again, going back to the subconscious mind, I can't tell you how many professionals I've worked with, everybody that I've worked with, that just has this underlying stress that they can't get to with years of therapy and breath work and meditation. It's still, I've worked with so many advanced Dr. Joe people. And if that thing that got fired and wired back in childhood, and it could be something really stupid, you could have come from a good family and, dad just said something nasty to you when you were doing your homework because you weren't keeping up with your sister. Or it could be something major.
Internal, like being bullied at school, for example, right?
That too.
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No. There's big T and little t trauma, but if that is still living in the subconscious mind, then it's going to be elevating those cortisol levels and wearing you out. There's a huge health component here, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. And when you remove those old weights that have been dragging you down, some people describe them as invisible restraints, invisible hooks, invisible walls, but they just, no matter how much therapy, breath work, meditation they do, they just don't feel like they can get to it. But if you access it easily through the subconscious mind, there's ways to get it to leave faster than you think.
I'm curious, what are your thoughts on psychedelics?
Great question. They have a lot of benefits. I call my process the psychedelics without the psychedelics because I wouldn't say that they're for everybody. Some people do have bad experiences and sometimes it can set them back a ways. Most people, I think, generally have good experiences. It's very important to be in a container with a guide that is holding a good space. I've heard lots of stories of people who, I'm aware of spaces that were not so good.
I think what's important to understand about psychedelics is, and I love that you frame it and you do psychedelics without the psychedelics, which is what really we need, right? But I'm talking more about psychedelics kind of in that like therapy context, right? Not recreational.
Well, I think a lot of people are doing it for therapy. I mean, up until recently, a lot of the stuff wasn't available in the US. It's only been recently that Ibogaine was taken off of Schedule 1, which I think is wonderful. I have done a flood dose of Ibogaine down in Mexico because I knew, I mean, I'm not because I needed it, because I was just curious. And when I heard from a researcher at Stanford that it was the word's gotten out that it's an amazing brain upgrade, I was like, okay, great, sign me up. I had a unique opportunity to do it in a beachfront, hotel owned by a friend. And so I just was like, okay, I want to experience this. That said, there was somebody there that did it, and I thought he was going to sail through the process. It was very, very difficult for him. It's considered a tough ride for a lot of people, but its track record for getting people off of drug addiction is really unparalleled. And PTSD, it's not anything anybody would use recreationally because it's just not. It's not. It's kind of like confronting the taskmaster that you really have been running and hiding from, and it kind of forces you to. I hope I'm describing this well, but I'm doing this based on most of the descriptions that I've heard.
Right.
I did not find it to be an uncomfortable experience because it was kind of like watching a movie. And my friends who have done this for years and run facilities down there told me that's what I could expect. And that is indeed what I expected, what I experienced. So it was kind of, and when you come out of it, for most people, again, that was not the experience for one person. And those experiences are rare, that somebody has a really tough experience, might purge a lot, and just takes a number of days to sort of get back to feeling stable and normal.
Yeah. I've found the analogy, people that benefit from it, it's like walking through all your childhood trauma, but you're in heaven. And
Oh, interesting.
right, there's not that fear. You're kind of protected, and you're in this realm of like, I'm not scared. And then you get to revisit all of that trauma, and it's like, oh, it wasn't that bad. I don't know.
A lot of these things also can be microdosed, and the microdosing is you don't have the big experience, and so you don't necessarily risk the traumatic, not good experience.
Right.
But even Colorado legalized psilocybin because they found that one dose reduced violent crime and theft significantly.
Absolutely.
So these are all things that I think. In fact, I interviewed the fellow who does all the data for psychedelics.com.
Oh, interesting.
He actually lives close to me here in Tennessee.
Oh, it's not Michael Pollan, right? That's not.
No, but Michael Pollan's also a rock star.
Right. Yeah.
And each of the ones, they have different, areas that they sort of shine and specialize in terms of neurogenesis.
Yeah.
Can be very helpful for a number of things. So I think it's for a lot of people very helpful. I don't necessarily think doing it willy-nilly. The environment that you do it in, having somebody there that is a proper guide.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I think somebody was asking about improving short-term memory. Well, are you getting enough sleep maybe, and eating a little bit healthier? Because again, I think the memory and the brain fog can be related to deficiencies of neurotransmitters like acetylcholine, right? Where it's focusing on the transmission and the connections in the brain. And if you're not getting enough and you're not making enough, that's going to happen. So I'd be interested to learn a little bit more. So a lot of times it's just related to lack of sleep. And once you get sleep, it improves, but I'd be curious to learn a little bit more.
And probably to know the fat balances that are in the body.
Yeah.
And also the stress levels. I'm gonna chime in there on stress, because when you're constantly stressed out, when your body is worn down, and again that goes back to The Stress of Life by Hans Selye. If your tissues are degraded because you're chronically stressed, and again, a lot of that's going on at the subconscious level. When people have done this process, a lot of times they say they have much better clarity. They're able to see opportunities in front of them that were right there that they could see before. Mental clarity is nicely enhanced. Sleep is a problem. That's another thing that I found, that by going to the subconscious mind, again, there's kind of a checklist. You have to make sure that your blood sugar is not all out of whack. There's basic blood tests and probably food surveys that Christine could answer on that. However, a big component of that is the subconscious mind part. I did a conference with somebody who has the site mysleepjourney.com, and they specialize in working with people that have to work night shifts and all the health degrading that goes on with that. And one of the main pillars of what they do is hypnosis. So if somebody were wanting and needing an extremely comprehensive thing for sleep, where you're getting the blood tests for what's going on with the neurotransmitters and the food component and the coaching in that area, you can do that. But it's a very expensive program. It's $19,000.
Wow. Yeah. Sorry about the background noise. It's New York City. It's actually quiet now. In the last few weeks, my internet is flooded with info about liver health and thick, sluggish bile. Yeah. So our liver is like our biggest, basically, garbage disposal system in our body. It kind of eliminates all these toxins, right? But if it's overloaded, and it gets overloaded with things like microplastics, right? So these are things, think about it. If you're overloading your liver with things that your liver can't process on a day-to-day basis, it's going to get sluggish. And a lot of what I talk about in my book about this is, I know it sounds like a quick fix, but intermittent fasting helps with that, because again, if you think about your gut houses your immune system, right? So like 70% of our body's immune system is actually in our gut. And our gut also helps with digestion, right? Digestion, absorption of nutrients. So when we're eating literally all day, right, which most Americans do, is we're told to eat 3 meals a day. Most of the time we're eating our biggest meal late at night, which I don't think any other country does. I think we're the only ones eating big dinners in the evening. And that's probably the worst thing you can do, because just when your gut is ready to kind of switch into immune functioning mode at night, it now has to focus on digesting, right? So it has to digest all these nutrients now, and then the liver has to look at what's going on and detox. And so it's almost like I kind of always say, like, remember that I Love Lucy episode where they were in that chocolate factory and then everything was going smoothly, and then the chocolate started running faster and faster and they couldn't catch up. Well, that's what's happening in your gut and your liver. If your gut and your liver are not having time to focus on immune function and kind of making those neurotransmitters and making these vitamins and protecting the barrier of the gut, it's going to go into a backup system where everything's going to get backed up. Everything's going to get sluggish. And again, so we talked about this earlier, is your liver houses that glycogen, that stored glucose that we use as fuel, secondary fuel. So if you're never tapping into that, which is usually after 8 to 10 hours of not eating. So if you're not eating for 8 to 10 hours, which is not that hard, right? If you think about, like, you're finishing dinner at 6, right? So in the middle of the night, while you're still asleep around 2, 3 a.m., your body's tapping into that glycogen and it's starting to burn it. And so that's kind of relieving the liver a little bit. So the liver doesn't have to deal with that. And so these are things that, little things like that, for example, can help with detox and slowing down that sluggishness. And that, believe it or not, also affects our mood, because that backup, again, that travels to the brain. I mean, if we think about Hippocrates from thousands of years ago, he's the one that actually termed the title melancholia. So that was him noticing, he was a doctor, him noticing that people, when they had sluggish GI systems, right? Cholia is colic, or like bile, it caused melon, which is like sadness, right? Melancholia. That sadness was like sluggish bile, basically. And so he even noticed that. And I think back then, we probably didn't have as much information and as much science that was easier to pinpoint things. Whereas now we're just so overwhelmed with so many different options and so many different things that we're not able to see clearly, and our body's overwhelmed too, and it can't figure out what to do. And we just need to go back to the simple basics.
I was, you don't know what to believe on the internet. I'd done intermittent fasting. I've been doing it for 3 years. I initially, in the first like 6 months, I lost 30 pounds. And then I just got stuck at a weight that I'm still way overweight, but I just got stuck there. And no matter what I did, I couldn't go beyond that. And then I started reading about this connection between cortisol and the liver health and the bile, and that the bile is what breaks down the cortisol. And they said that when your body's in those fasting hours, your body's creating, when your body thinks it's starving, and you did mention this a little bit at the beginning, your body starts creating cortisol when it thinks it's starving. And so I didn't know where to draw the line. And I'm like, well, maybe my problem is not, I shouldn't be doing this intermittent fasting. And so I stopped intermittent fasting for 2 weeks, and I gained 10 pounds in 2 weeks. And
So I'm really glad that you brought this up. Yeah, because this is a question that like every woman asks me. And I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And so when I talk about intermittent fasting, I am not talking about starving, because again, just whenever you think about a process, just honestly, just take a step back. Don't worry about what the influencers are saying. Take a step back and actually imagine your body and what it's thinking. And so your body is this most efficient machine. And if you're feeding it really well, so if you're feeding it really good fibers, really good nutrients, and you're not starving it, right? You're eating good meals that are, I would say 70% plant-based, right? And then 30% whatever else, 60 to 70% needs to be that fiber to keep those bacteria full. If you're eating that, your body's not going to release cortisol because it's satisfied. The cortisol comes from a couple of things. It comes from, number one, starving, because again, your body's in survival mode. She's starving. I need to preserve fat, right? Don't want to starve. You want to eat 2 good meals that are really fiber rich, so that the fullness that the bacteria feel sends signals to the brain, and that satiety center is stimulated and everybody's happy. This is where people get this wrong, is where they think intermittent fasting is starving. The other thing I notice is a lot of people doing a very prolonged fast, intermittent fast. Again, especially for women, men can probably get away with doing a little bit of a longer fast, like up to 36 hours, because their body's not built to be fertile, right? Again, the fertility affects cortisol. So for women, if your body again senses that you're not getting enough and you're starving, or you're fasting for a prolonged period, that cortisol is going to kick in again, because it's protecting you. It's thinking, well, she needs to bear a child, right? So I need to protect her. I need to keep those fat stores on the hips. So I'm going to release more cortisol, because cortisol and insulin are fat storage hormones. And so the things that you don't want to do is really tip the scale. It's a fine line. Tip the scale to where your body thinks it's in survival mode versus happy mode. So those are the 2 biggest mistakes that I see with intermittent fasting: is you're not eating enough fiber, and so you're hungry, and so your body's kind of feeling like it's starving, and it goes into that cortisol increase. Or you're just not eating enough calories, or you're fasting for prolonged periods. And I don't recommend more than 20 hours for women, because unless it's like once a month and you kind of want to just do like a 24 hour fast. But for women, you really don't want to fast for prolonged periods, because our bodies are built a little differently, and our body's backup mechanism is that we're supposed to be fertile, right? Even when we're postmenopausal. It's meant to store that fat in the hips or wherever we store it, because that's how our body sees it, as a survivor mechanism. So I wrote a chapter on this in my book, chapter 5. Honestly, it's probably the easiest explanation of fasting that you'll read, because it not only explains the science, but it kind of tells you like why this is actually working and why it's not working, and who shouldn't do it, and the different types. And once you read it, you understand your body. And like, my book is really more about not me giving you advice, but you understanding your body. So I hope that answered it.
It makes me confident to go back to the intermittent fasting and
Right? It worked.
and make sure I get a lot more fiber this time.
Yes, it worked for you. And for whatever reason, your body sensed that maybe you were going into survival mode, and then it kicked into, oh boy, I don't.
But it's been 2 years now that I'm just stuck at this weight, and why can't I go back down to a healthy weight? I don't understand why it's not, I don't understand why it stopped working.
I'm going to chime in. If you are getting enough physical activity, enough sunshine, and you are eating good balanced foods, I get a lot of people who lose weight with just going into the subconscious mind, dumping the old stress patterns, and then once the cortisol's not there all the time, weight is much more easy to come off.
And I'm hoping Saturday mornings are a point.
It's a really good point because stress and lack of sleep and the subconscious trauma that on thing also keep our cortisol levels up. And if our cortisol levels are right, we're not going to lose the weight.
I think besides the cortisol, I think I just have a very slow metabolism, but I think so much of that was the cortisol was making me lose sleep, and I'm sleeping better, not 100% better, but I'm sleeping a lot better than I used to.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm hoping that maybe things will start moving in the right direction. Just,
I mean, sometimes too, it's
so confused by everything on the internet.
Too many calories, and you know, I don't really encourage people to count calories religiously, but some people overestimate what they're eating, and a lot of times, yeah, you're right. Your metabolism does drop as we age, and I'm somebody who I've never had a great metabolism. I mean, I have obesity that runs in my family on both sides, and when I lost the weight when I was younger, I realized that like I can't just eat like everyone else.
Yeah,
it's not the same.
Now, my family's not obese. I'm the only one, and I think I just had it. Yeah, I'm not going to get into the personal history, but I'm just so confused.
there are a lot of factors, and you're right. There's a lot of confusion out there, but you know, as Dr. Tara mentioned, there's a lot that's held in our subconscious. It's almost like our body doesn't want to heal because like that fat that we're holding is protecting us, right? There's like that subconscious. But again, there's so many different things that elevate our cortisol, but also like if we're eating a lot of sugar, we're going to get elevated insulin levels, right? Yeah. And hyperinsulinemia can also cause fat storage. So
I don't eat a lot of sugar.
Yeah.
I cataloged my diet for a week, and my median intake was about 1,600 calories.
Okay.
Part of me was like, well, it's nice not to have to feel guilty every time I put food in my mouth because I'm eating the amount I'm eating is fine.
Yeah. You know, even if you like maybe drop like 100 or 200 calories, it actually sometimes makes a difference. Like our body kind of sets this point, and especially if we've lost weight a couple of times, it like sets this point and then it like sticks to it. So sometimes even just going to 1,500 or 1,400 calories makes a difference. But I think what also makes a difference is the type of calories.
For sure.
Fiber-rich calories that are, you know, a lot of like vegetables.
And if you can get away from processed foods, you know, you want foods, Marissa Peer calls it the 4 R's, but you want foods that you can recognize. If you look at the label and you can't, you know, you need a chemical bioengineer to tell you what's in it, then no. If you can't recreate it in your kitchen, no. If it didn't roam or grow on the planet, no. And it should rot. I mean, if you've got something that, you know, you can stick in a time capsule and 100 years from now, it still looks the same. It's not food. So, and to Christine's point earlier, you know, food has changed and humanity's changed a lot, and especially in the last 100 years. In the 1800s, the average American consumed about 15 grams of sugar a day. It's now over 285.
Wow.
The human body can't handle it.
Yeah.
So, Christine, I had a friend who lost weight quite easily and quite successfully. Whenever she was ready to eat, she ate half a cup of vegetables. Would you recommend something like a strategy like that?
That's everything I'm all about is vegetables first. Beans. Again, if you think about your microbiome as these trillions of organisms, some are good, some are bad. The bad ones are lazy. They want processed foods, but they don't really do the work. They're not doing anything in the gut except releasing these toxins. And so if you keep feeding them, they're not really going to do a lot. But if you feed the good bacteria, and you know, the good bacteria like vegetables, they like fiber, they like variety. When you feed them, then they produce these products that really help us. And one of these products you probably all have heard of. 5 years ago when I used to talk about this, nobody knew what I was talking about. But they affect these GLP-1 receptors. So believe it or not, the bacteria in our gut produce something called postbiotics. So everybody's heard of probiotics, right? You take a probiotic. Well, our probiotic bacteria, they produce postbiotics. And some of these postbiotics are these substances that actually activate the GLP-1 receptors. So you can have that natural GLP-1 effect from eating vegetables. And so a lot of people will say, like, I ate, a big bowl of whatever broccoli and I'm not hungry, right? So always eat the vegetables first. And I write this again. I talk about this in my book is we've seen that glucose spikes occur when we have the carb first. So if you want that carb, you want that little sweet something, have it at the end of the meal. So fiber-rich vegetables first. If you can incorporate beans into your meals at least 3 or 4 times a week, beans are great. They're good protein sources. Then have your protein. So whatever protein you're having, the chicken or the whatever, the eggs or whatever, and then have your carbohydrate. And then if you want a little, I love my chocolate. So I'll have like a piece of chocolate after most of my meals. And,
Dark chocolate.
Dark chocolate, exactly.
So just a really clean dark chocolate. You can even get raw cacao. I mean, talk about, guilt-free.
Yes.
And then just, mix it up with
Put on, like a yogurt with blueberries and raw.
Oh, it's heaven on earth.
It is. It's really good. Yeah.
And it's full of, there was books written about how good raw cacao is for your body. Not all the, don't go get a Hershey bar. Get something.
Yeah.
Get something that's well made, and the purer the better. And just research and try different things. Notice how you feel after you eat something. That's really important because if you're eating garbage, your body's going to tell you, but you got to listen. Greg had a question about an app called Yuka where you can scan barcodes on food packages. Is that reliable, Christine?
I don't know Yuka. I know the is it EWR? Environmental. Pretty sure it's EWR where it's kind of a similar app. But if Yuka does the job and it's scanning it, it's fine.
I think it's really, really important to know the reliability of these things because if they're put out by good Lord, the food pyramid forever in this country was based on what General Mills told you to eat. I mean, do you think that was going to amount to anything good? It was the opposite of
Kellogg's. The whole Kellogg story, right? Does everybody know Kellogg's? Yeah. It was Dr. Kellogg who introduced cereal as the best breakfast because he wanted to sell you the cereal. And so
and Jimmy Moore actually went to when he figured out, the guy was obese and did all the stuff his doctors told him. And then he had to figure out through people like Christine and other experts in this field, oh, okay, that's all garbage. What my Western MD is telling me based on what he learned in medical school. And he went to the actual legal groups that made the recommendations to the public. And he said, you've got to stop lying to people because, I was hundreds of pounds overweight and couldn't lose weight. You've got to start telling people the truth. And, everybody there was reps for the big agra and big pharma.
By the way, we were talking about chronic inflammation. I just remembered it when you were talking about this. So we were talking about chronic inflammation, how it kind of hinders your body from healing, and it's like on constant cortisol alert. Well, this was actually what happened in COVID during the pandemic. That people got really, really sick. They were on a different level of inflammation than people who didn't get really sick. And those people, unfortunately, their body was in a chronic inflammatory state, and then you get COVID, and it just can't handle it because it's already super inflamed. And so it's almost like it's just kind of walking on eggshells. Whereas if you have somebody with a good immune system who doesn't have this chronic inflammatory state, did much better, like children, right? So children didn't have that chronic inflammation and they had high levels of the really important bacteria in our gut called Bifidobacteria. If there's anything you're going to remember from this talk, it's Bifidobacteria. That is the king of the microbiome. It's a very beneficial bacteria. It's what protected children from more severe COVID infections because they have so much of it. And it's basically, they're born with a lot of levels of it because it's their body's protective mechanism, their natural immunity. When they're born, it's a protective factor. And then we slowly start to lose it as we get older. But unfortunately, eating harmful foods that feed the bad bacteria kill off this bacteria. And so we don't want zero bifidobacteria or very low levels. We want good, adequate levels. And bifidobacteria love to eat vegetables. So,
And I'm going to chime in there for something for stress, which was a really amazing thing found during COVID. Dr. Joe Dispenza did a lot of research with the people that were attending the events. They were getting into this beautiful heart and brain coherence. And again, when you dump the old subconscious patterns that are pulling you out of heart and brain coherence, when you're in that heart and brain coherence, and there's ways to train your mind to do it, but they showed that all these advanced meditators were basically immune to getting COVID because they had such higher levels of something in the blood called serpin A5, and serpin A5 would sit on the cell walls, and they would prevent the COVID virus from entering the cell.
there have been studies on that too. Meditation and prayer, they increase your lifespan by 5 years just from that positive thought of knowing that it's okay, right? Again, it's that subconscious. So don't underestimate the subconscious mind, and don't underestimate social connections as well, because they're really, really important for our health as well.
On that note, I'm actually reading a book on that. Actually, I'll mention that later. But Christine, oh my God, this has been an absolutely delightful time with you. Does anybody else want to chime in? I don't know if you've got a hard stop, Christine.
I do not know.
Okay. If anybody's got one more question, we can take one more. I wanted to mention, you mentioned beans, and the legendary Dr. Alan Gaby. When I went to his conferences, he would always say beans for breakfast. And that was very helpful for helping people that were diabetic or pre-diabetic. So bravo on that. Is there any particular type of bean? Because we got a lot of beans at our disposal.
Basically, all beans, just go for diversity. Lentils are amazing. They're really high in protein. They're very high in fiber. Bifidobacteria love lentils. Black beans are really good. Kidney beans are really good. I would say just go for a variety. Edamame, those are, the soybeans, amazing too. I know a lot of people have issues with beans. If you do, you might want to rinse them before you put them on your food, and you can start slowly. So if you haven't really started eating vegetables and beans and things like that, you can start slowly, because remember, your gut microbiome is going to slowly shift towards a healthier microbiome, because you might not have as many beneficial bacteria. And so you want to introduce it slowly and see how you react. And you can keep a food log and see what foods you're reacting to and what you're not. And then be mindful. Some people don't tolerate certain foods, and then that's okay. You just write a list. But the common response that I get is, I get really bad stomach aches and bloating when I start vegetables and beans. It's because your gut's not used to it. And so you can just slowly introduce. So start with something that you tolerate, and then add one or two things a week and see how you tolerate it.
And soaking them and rinsing them to remove the lectins can be
lectins,
helpful for
exactly.
people who are sensitive to that.
Right. Yeah.
And with regard to the memory issues and the lack of sleep, if you'd like to connect with me and see if this is a good fit for you, I'm happy to do that. Or anybody who's listening to this, I'm at consulttara.com or nashvillehealer.com. You can just click the Start Here button and answer some questions, and we can get together and see if that's a good fit for you. And we have Dr. Christine at fromwithinmedical.com, and her book, The Gut Revolution, is available on both audio and physical copy.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for everybody for showing up. Great questions. Was an honor to be with all of you today.
Okay, bye for now.
This podcast is intended for the purpose of providing information and education. It does not provide advice and is not meant to be used for any self-diagnosis or the replacement of any kind of licensed professional. The creators and individuals appearing here do not endorse any specific tests, positions, medications, products, or procedures. The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.